the wreckage of Obamacare and giving the states more power to give people more choices of coverage, I think is really, really crucial. One of the things that this legislation that's being developed, I agree with you, Dr. Burgess, this is going to pass, and we heard Reince Priebus and Steve Bannon saying the president delivers on his promises. And what's his number one promise? Repeal and replace Obamacare. But it is repeal and replace. And one of the lies of the left has been Republicans have no ideas. The House of Representatives worked almost all of last year refining plans from the different committee chairs, from senators that have been offered, conservative think tanks, to come up with a consensus plan. That's the basis for the legislation that's being developed now. It enhances self-savings accounts. It provides protection for people who have pre-existing conditions. It gives states more resources to help people who can't afford their coverage. It would reform Medicaid, which is a disaster of a program, a ghetto of a program. But the most important thing, I think, to again reiterate what Dr. Burgess said, we're not going to get everything we want in this first bill. This is the platform to begin once-in-a-generation reform. We can build on that later, but Senator Schumer wants nothing more than to see this effort fail, because they know Obamacare is failing, and they want to blame somebody else after 4 election cycles when they've been pummeled on Obamacare. If it fails, if this legislation fails, the failure of Obamacare is going to increasingly be something that people blame Republicans for. So you may not like everything in this bill, but think of it as a down payment on really getting to the right kind of reform that we can pass maybe with Democrat support through regular order, but the process we have to go through doesn't allow you to get to everything in Obamacare. It has to be directly related to taxing or spending. So there will be, we have to do this, we have to get this out of here to be able to deliver on the repeal with replace pledge to the American people, and to then begin the process of truly returning to a health sector that can be America's greatest health sector again.
Now, one of the things that I've written about a lot is that I think that the debate within Republicans, I mean, it's often been joked that it's not that Republicans don't have a plan, it's that they have far too many. And I always say that everything sort of comes to this philosophical difference, which is sort of how much government intervention is somebody comfortable with to try to ensure broad coverage, and how much do you care about coverage versus cost or something like that. And I think that policy-wise, this is often turned into a debate, manifested itself, I should say, in this debate over should we give people tax credits to purchase insurance, or should they be given deductions? And it kind of seems like an esoteric debate, but it's actually about what role you want for government, because tax credits are the equivalent of subsidies effectively. It requires more government spending. Deductions are a tax cut effectively. However, if you have somebody who's low income who has a low tax burden against which to deduct, the deduction doesn't do much for them, so then you're not expanding coverage as much. So ultimately, this fight among Republicans and conservatives comes down to this underlying philosophical disagreement. So could you talk about that sort of debate within the Republican?
Well, I think it's really, what would we want if we were starting with the right kind of policy for the health sector? We are not starting there. We're starting with Obamacare. We're starting with, some number of millions of people, probably not as many as 20, but 20 million people, let's say, relying on Obamacare. So you have to create a lifeboat for them, and using structures that provide the kind of resources that people need who don't have means to purchase health insurance on their own, so they can continue coverage. The last thing we want is for Republicans to be blamed for millions of people losing their coverage again. So they have to have this lifeboat. It's very likely to be refundable tax credit. Thank you. And at the same time, you've got to build a bridge for the future, so that you've got this lifeboat out there while you're creating the bridge for a better system that gives people choices of the kind of coverage that they want and that they can afford. And it's very likely to be refundable tax credits. I don't know. But by the way, when you hear these CBO scores, The CBO has gotten it very, very wrong with Obamacare, so we should take them with very much a grain of salt.
If I could get Scott involved here. Scott serves as CEO of eHealth Insurance, which is a website that before Obamacare existed allowed people to go on and compare among different plans and purchase insurance online. If you could talk a bit about the industry perspective, because this is, as we've seen, a big factor in all of this. Insurers are losing money under Obamacare. A lot of them are leaving or contemplating leaving. And could you talk to that, but also to the critique that some of the uncertainty about what Republicans are going to do is maybe creating more problems for insurers than it's alleviating?
Yeah, let's start with the fact that we don't have the luxury of time. Obamacare is already repealing in and of itself. It's disappearing because insurers have fled the market. They've lost billions of dollars. I don't represent the insurance companies. We're neutral. We're consumer-centric. But they are who pay us commissions for enrolling people in health care. And they're leaving because they can't make money. There's way too much fraud in the system. And it's until we fix the system, and it needs to be an ambitious fix. It can't just be a partial fix. We have to go after the whole loaf here. We have to go after it now. Consumers are leaving. They can't afford it. You know, the left talk about the 20 million people. Well, that number is drastically exaggerated. People sign up, they get the first premium, and they can't pay it. It's $1,000 for a family. Middle-class families don't have that kind of cash. And so they enroll, and then they disenroll. But insurers have to keep covering them for 3 months. And then the next year, they can enroll again and not have to make the back payment. So insurers are losing billions and billions of dollars here in this system. It's not working for young people. The target was to enroll 40% of Obamacare enrollees as millennials. The actual numbers this past year were 22% were millennials. Well, why? Because it's a one-size-fits-all, way too expensive program, and millennials are opting out. I don't think the mandate matters at all. Only 4% of our customers say the mandate had any impact at all on them enrolling in health care.
Now, Dale, you spoke earlier today about Liberty Health Share and about the idea of pooling risk for people who don't want to have health insurance and want to share medical costs. But that sort of raises questions about how broadly applicable is that toward the overall health insurance system, where you have hundreds of millions of people trying to get insurance. Could you talk to that?
It is our interest that we really present a option for the consumer to make those choices. Our motivation is to just merely have the freedom and opportunity to continue our movement of sharing medical bills, free from not only government involvement, but free from insurance, and just simply permit an open marketplace so that our option continues as well as many others.
But how do you get away from, I mean, every insurer deals with the problem, it's adverse selection, right? That people, the fear that you're only going to get the sickest people to gain coverage and sign up, and then you're going to have to cover those people, but you won't have younger and healthier people to defray the cost. In a system such as yours, how does that work? How do you basically prevent only sicker people with higher medical costs from saying, yeah, I want to share my medical costs?
The vast majority of pre-existing conditions presented to Liberty Health Share are those conditions particularly responsive to lifestyle change. And so we welcome those pre-existing conditions: high blood pressure, heart disease, type 2 diabetes, certainly obesity, smoking. Those are conditions that we welcome, but we enroll them in our Health Track program, which means we assign them a health coach. They set out their own definable treatment plan, and then with the support and guidance of a health coach, reach those objectives once those are accomplished. So they're reducing not only their costs through lifestyle changes and support, diet, exercise, et cetera, but they're taking the responsibility for the costs associated with those particularly responsive to lifestyle. Other conditions, which are a minuscule percentage of pre-existings, we don't share in the first year. But the second, third, and fourth years we do, and they're no longer pre-existing with us.
Now, if I could get the rest of the panel to weigh in on this, on the issue of pre-existing conditions, because I'd say that whenever you're in discussions with somebody who's skeptical of free market alternatives, it's usually one of the first questions is, well, what about people with pre-existing conditions? Wouldn't insurers in a free market have every reason to say, well, they're too costly, so we don't want to insure them. It's a money-losing endeavor. Do you want to?
Yeah, let's be sure of what we're talking about, because we are talking about people in the individual market. In the large group market, the employer-sponsored market, where most Americans get their health insurance, once you go through the probationary period of employment, you're covered. You have the benefit. It is pre-existing conditions exist in the individual market as an exclusionary device that medical underwriting created. But what are the real numbers? And you know, when the Affordable Care Act was up before the Supreme Court in 2012, I struggled with what do we need to do to be, because I thought it was going away, right? How could they possibly say this is constitutional? We're forcing you to buy it, so we're going to regulate it under the Commerce Clause. That's crazy. No one's going to think like that. Well, I was wrong. But I thought, what are the main things that people are going to be concerned about? Kids on 20 till 26, donut hole in Medicare, and pre-existing. Well, the insurance company said kids to 26 is a good marketing strategy. We're going to keep that. So good. That problem solved. The donut hole, I thought, was a problem that pharma created for themselves down at the White House when Obamacare was written, so that's their problem. But the pre-existing conditions. There was a federal pre-existing pool that was created for the first time in the Affordable Care Act. It had not existed prior. So how many people in that pre-existing pool that was created under the Affordable Care Act, how many people are we going to have to deal with? It was 65,000. 65,000. Tell me we can't solve a problem for 65,000 people. Why do we have to make everybody else's life miserable while we're trying to solve a problem for 65,000 people? Of course we can. But that approach was never taken, and that was to me, one of the big failings. And the Democrats pushed pre-existing conditions. There's 125 million people out there with pre-existing conditions. Now, the actual numbers are quite small, and it is a small segment of the population. It's an important segment. It's a sympathetic segment. We can take care of that with flexibility that states can use, with the grants to states for flexible risk pools. There are a number of things that could be done. We didn't have to do what Obama did.
And the real issue, Phil, is that people need continuous coverage protection. They need to have insurance. Pre-existing conditions are a problem when you're trying to buy into an insurance market. We need to have an open season, or an open enrollment period, when people can buy in. And as long as they keep that insurance, they can be continuously protected from premium spikes. They can't just jump in and out of the market, as Scott said, as they are doing now. So pre-existing conditions is really a temporary problem. If you have a system in which people want to buy health insurance because it meets their needs and they can afford it. That's not the case with Obamacare, and as a result you've got this 40,000-page mass of regulations to try to pin everybody in. No, our view is give people options and choices that they can purchase through eHealth, that they can get through Liberty Health, just countless other options for coverage if you had real market forces working so that people are able to get and keep coverage. It's not rocket science.
And if I can use the words exciting and health policy together in a sentence, the most exciting day in health policy for me was the day before inauguration. The governors were in town. I have never seen so much energy and enthusiasm. The governors brought to these roundtables, one on the Senate side, one on the House side. They want to be involved in these problems. They feel that they were left out when this stuff was created 8 years ago. They are anxious to participate in our solutions.
Okay, we're about to have to wrap up, but I just want to, yes or no question quickly. By next CPAC, will Obamacare be repealed and replaced? And each one could take that.
Yes.
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 Yes, followed by an if, the reconciliation. Well, the reconciliation obviously will pass before and be signed by the president sometime in the very near time horizon. What happens on the regulatory front, what happens on the reconstruction of the insurance issues under regular order, that's all going to take some time. Could we still be talking about it next CPAC? Sure, we could be. That's full employment for me.
But Phil, don't underestimate the benefit of the executive order that President Trump signed. There's a lot that can be done on the regulatory front here to make this a much more consumer-friendly and insurer-friendly system.
Okay, well, thank you, everyone, and thank you for those who listened.
Yes,
Please welcome Tom Fitton of Judicial Watch, interviewed by Kelly Riddell from the Washington Times.
Well, thanks everyone for sticking around. As you know, Tom at Judicial Watch his organization has doggedly pursued Hillary Clinton and exposed her email scandal, drove home to the American public her untrustworthiness throughout the entirety of the campaign season. You guys did the work, basically, that the mainstream media was unwilling to do,
right,
what Congress was unwilling to do,
right,
and the Obama administration was unwilling to look into. So based on that, you still have several lawsuits pending regarding the Obama administration, corruption in that, as well as regarding Hillary Clinton. Now that Donald Trump is in the White House, how is your organization's focus going to change, and how do you see wrapping up a lot of those suits that you still have out there pending?
Well, there's a lot there to unwrap, but obviously we changed history with the Clinton email scandal. Yeah. We uncovered it.
Yeah, you did.
It wasn't Congress, it wasn't the media, and of course it was the Obama administration that was implicated in helping her cover it up. And scandal matters to the American people. Fighting corruption matters, and certainly there was no indictment of Hillary Clinton yet. But if there was a grand jury sitting on Election Day, they made their views known on whether Clinton did anything wrong on her email scandal. And we're still in the middle of the email scandal. We're still trying to get all the emails, and frankly, President Trump's administration should consider reopening or pursuing any ongoing criminal investigations related to Hillary Clinton.
So what do you still have ongoing? I know the FBI has recovered some of the emails that she deleted.
We still don't have all of her emails. We still don't have all the pay-for-play emails. And the Obama administration has slow-walked the release of that information, have been fighting us tooth and nail. The Trump administration has been in office a minute, and so they aren't up to speed as to what needs to be released more quickly and to stop the obstruction. In many ways, we're waiting for the Trump administration still to take power in that regard to get the transparency we need, not only from the State Department, from the Justice Department, which was absolutely ruined by President Obama.
Well, and we know a lot of Obama's staff, there's a lot of Obama holdovers that are still within the Trump administration. A lot of the emails that you exposed and a lot of the reporting coming out, this year has been about this shadow government that's basically going on, that's trying to undermine Trump's agenda from the get-go. What can you say to that, and what can Trump do to kind of root out the shadow government that you started to expose?
Well, the Obama administration is still there in many ways, and the administration hasn't appointed all the officials they need to appoint to the various agencies. And I say from Judicial Watch's perspective, we're obviously going to be looking at what President Trump is up to. We need to hold the president accountable to the rule of law, and I think he expects that. If he doesn't, he's in for a surprise. But then on top of that, there's this alt government in place, a government staffed by recent appointees or hires of President Obama. And I often joke there are lots of Democrats in the bureaucracy, but on the other hand, there are also a lot of Republicans who think they know better than President Trump and are willing to thwart the rule of law. And, there's nothing wrong with having honest dissent and disagreements. But when you're hired as a federal official, you're supposed to do what the president says within the law. And no one's asking him to do anything illegal, but they're organizing actively against him and subverting the rule of law. And we see elements of this with the targeting of General Flynn. General Flynn did nothing wrong, in my view. He was wronged. And let's be clear. You had President Obama and his team wiretap President Trump after he won the election and his team. On what basis? So it's not about Russia connections. It's about illegal wiretapping of the Trump organization and his transition staff by an out-of-control Justice Department and Obama administration. And then they're leaking the results of that classified wiretaps in a way that harms the national security and tries to destroy their political enemies. It's the IRS scandal, except at the national security level.
And so what has your organization has requested from the NSA?
Oh, we're on it.
Yeah.
I mean, we're not going to wait for Congress to investigate it. We're not going to wait for the Justice Department to investigate it. We've asked under the Freedom of Information Act last month for some of these records, and we could be suing within days just to get access to this information.
And then as soon as he gets access, you guys get access, and we get the truth uncovered. I want to kind of shift topics, and voter fraud has been a topic of conversation.
Right.
And if you listen to the mainstream media, they would say it doesn't exist, that there is no such thing, and that we should all just move on, and this is one of Trump's terrible, dreams. What say you about voter fraud? Does it exist? How can it be uncovered? Is it a problem?
It exists and it needs to be investigated. The left would have you believe we have 43 million aliens present in the United States, both lawful and unlawfully present, and none of them vote. Now, President Trump would suggest maybe 3 to 5 million of them vote, or others people vote illegally. Well, obviously the number is somewhere in between. It's probably about 1 million or so. But why not ask the question? Yeah. Under the Obama administration, they opposed voter ID. They opposed the idea of even asking someone whether they were a citizen or making sure they were a citizen before they registered to vote. Why on earth would you be opposed to that other than you wanting to be able to steal elections when necessary? Mm-hmm. And we've been fighting for voter integrity at Judicial Watch. We've battled the Obama administration. We sued states to clean up the rolls. But the president's idea about a federal investigation into voter fraud will be the most significant civil rights investigation in a generation. We're on the side of civil rights. We're on the side of the civil rights of American voters who potentially are having their votes stolen from them by the thousands, if not millions, by illegal votes. He should be pursuing this, and it's easy to figure out whether there's voter fraud. And obviously that's why the left is screaming, because they're afraid their jig is up.
Yeah, and we don't know what we don't know. And so to say that there's no such thing because we have an investigator exposed to it, I think is a nonsensical argument. But President Trump announced that next week he's going to unveil a new immigration ban, a new travel order. What do you think of the old order? What needs to be done to improve the new order? And do you like his immigration policy thus far?
Only in Washington is it revolutionary to finally enforce the rule of law. He's not doing anything new. He's just enforcing the law as written. People who are here illegally, if you're a criminal who's violent, you're more likely to be deported. But if we run into you and you're here illegally, you could also be deported because you're not supposed to be here. That's a quite sensible approach, and that's what the law is, and it should be no surprise. And the idea that it's controversial that these terrorist-infected states go through more scrutiny before we allow citizens from those states enter the United States, why is that controversial? Look, the left has this massive infrastructure that's going to oppose any enforcement of our immigration laws. And frankly, there are more than a few Republicans who don't like that either. So this is only revolutionary because Washington doesn't want what the American people want. And immigration is controversial in Washington, D.C. till Trump because the politicians in Washington wanted to do something the American people didn't want to do, which was grant amnesty. And evidently that ain't going to happen under this president. But in the meantime, we're going to do our work. We're suing San Francisco over their sanctuary policy. So you citizens, you can't rest on your laurels, either through Judicial Watch or on your own. You have to be watchdogs over the government. It isn't over just because President Trump is president.
And what can they do? Just, we have zero time left, but, you know, as active, engaged conservatives that want to expose the truth, where can they go to your website?
Well, they can go to our website, obviously, at judicialwatch.org, but hold your local officials to account and ask the Congress when are they going to finally start doing what they're supposed to do in terms of government oversight, because we're happy to do the work, but frankly, it's outrageous we're the only ones doing it. But we're happy to do it for you, and it shows you we can change history if you're focused on these issues. Thank you very much.
Thank you much. Thanks, Tom.
Hey, thank you, Kelly.
Our next session is The United States Must Stop Funding Palestinian Authority Pensions for Terror. Please welcome Fellow at the Jerusalem Center of Public Affairs, Sander Gerber.
Hi, I'm Sander Gerber, and thanks for the opportunity to share something surprising, something, frankly, that I didn't know. Despite being involved in Israel policy for decades, and even more surprising is the lack of awareness of our so-called experts on Middle East, and even our nation's political leaders. So I'd like to show a video, please.
Did you know that hundreds of millions of your tax dollars fund the Palestinian Authority, which pays salaries to terrorists when they kill? The PA rewards lifetime payments to imprisoned terrorists and families of killed terrorists. Yes, this is actual Palestinian law. Money for murder. In March of 2016, a Palestinian terrorist snuck into Israel and stabbed to death Taylor Force, a West Point graduate and a veteran of Iraq and Afghanistan who was visiting Israel as part of his MBA studies. Israeli police killed the terrorist, but the Palestinian Authority rewarded the terrorist's family with lifetime payments for what they called his heroic martyrdom for Islam. Taylor Force's parents ask why.
The news reports showed celebrating in the streets, Palestine, saying that they'd taken out a serviceman, an American, and I just totally could not understand how a people could think like that. And I still don't know. Different value systems, different approach to life. There's no sense supporting people that want to do us harm.
Senator Lindsey Graham explains the Taylor Force Act, the bill that he and Senators Dan Coats and Roy Blunt introduced to stop using our tax dollars to fund the Palestinian Authority until the PA stops funding terrorism.
I want the American people to know that this bill is not a result of animosity toward the Palestinian people. It is pushback against state-sponsored terrorism. If you're seeking a two-state solution, then one state cannot be a sponsor of terrorism.
Terrorists are not martyrs. They're murderers. Tell your elected official to stop using your tax money as blood money. End pay to slay. Visit stopmoneyformurder.org.
Look, it's hard to believe, and even friends of Israel don't know that our tax money is being used as blood money. It's a bad deal. The PA passed legislation in 2004. They amended the legislation in 2013 to codify the longstanding practice of paying terrorists. Now, these payments are not coming from splinter radical groups. They're coming from the Palestinian Authority themselves. It's specified in their budget. It's $315 million for 2016. It's about 8% of the total PA budget. These monies are going to 36,000 people in monthly payments only because of violence against Israel. Now, in our terms, $300 million might not seem like a lot, but the average income in the West Bank is only $4,000 a year. So these terrorists have a tremendous incentive program. The legislation sets up ministries. So there's a Ministry of Prisons Affairs. And the Prison Affairs Ministry doesn't build and administer prisons. All it does is pay terrorist prisoners. In 2016, they got $140 million. Now, the laws provide that the more people you kill, the higher your monthly salary. If your sentence is over 5 years, you get a lifetime annuity. For a woman, if your sentence is over 2 years, you get a lifetime annuity. In fact, there's even a bonus for Israeli Arabs, and an additional bonus if you're from Jerusalem. Now, the PA legislation, in addition to the Prisoners Ministry, also has the Institution for the Care of the Martyrs. Martyrs are the people that blow themselves up in terror acts. People that rewards families like the person who tragically killed Taylor Force. That ministry got $175 million in 2016. So now I think you understand. You've probably seen these pictures of parents handing out candies to children when their children were killed in terror acts. That's because they're proud of their children becoming a shaheed, but also because now they're wealthy by Palestinian standards. The Palestinian leadership has built a bureaucracy to breed a society of violence. From cradle to grave, through education, social media, naming schools and playgrounds, people are well aware of this, but people are not so well aware that there's actually financial incentives. And again, these are not radical clerics. These laws come from the PA themselves. And in fact, they have an additional bonus that if you're a prisoner and you're released, as a man, if you spend 10 years in prison and you're released, then they give you a high-ranking, a new title in the PA bureaucracy. And as a woman, according to the law, 5 years in prison, you get a high title. So now you know why most of the PA leadership has spent time in Israeli jails. And in fact, the current PA leadership is really built on the legacy of Arafat. It's a legacy of terror, but instead of terror cells, the PA leadership is indoctrinating and programming their society to glorify violence. It's a leadership that celebrates death. Taylor Force was an American patriot. He was captain of the West Point ski team, served in Afghanistan, Iraq. He was our brother. Those responsible for his death is the Palestinian leadership. But let us not forget that terror travels. Other terror organizations are adopting similar reward and incentive programs, just like the Palestinians. We need to expose that the Palestinian Authority leadership has tricked America so that our tax money is used for pay to slay. We give the Palestinian Authority $400 million a year and another $250 to $350 million through UNRWA. Now, proponents of aid to the Palestinian Authority point out that we don't actually fund the terror because existing U.S. law reduces the amount of aid that we give to the PA based upon the amount that they pay the terrorists. So the State Department is actually charged to ascertain, I mean, this is hard to believe, the State Department is charged to ascertain how much money is the Palestinian Authority paying the terrorists, and that amount is deducted from the amount of money that we pay the PA. So even Congress is acknowledging that the PA is a terror-sponsoring entity. So I say enough with the appeasement. Doesn't matter if you're a Republican or a Democrat, money is fungible. Our money shouldn't be used to pay terror. We have enabled the PA leadership. We now need to disable the PA leadership. The Tailored Force Act will be introduced Tuesday in the U.S. Senate at 10 a.m. by Lindsey Graham and others. Everyone should work to stop the appeasement of terror. Please contact your senators. Please educate people as to the true nature of the Palestinian Authority. Thank you very much.
Jim of the Gun Gurus, and show's now on NRATV, and everyone's excited about it. Is there a gun that you haven't seen with your own eyes yet that you've only heard of and you know exists somewhere? It's not like some fake thing, but you just haven't gotten your hands on it yet and you're dying to?
Boy, that's a great question. Well, that's a wonderful question. I would like to see the Browning little 1910 that Gavrilo Princip shot the Archduke Franz Ferdinand in Sarajevo with. Wow. It's on display in Vienna. I've never been to Vienna. I'd like to go to Vienna for a number of reasons. Main of which is to ride that Ferris wheel that they have. Okay. It featured prominently in the movie The Third Man with Orson Welles, and I've always wanted to see it. Anyway, I digress. But that pistol started the Great War, which in turn begat the Second World War. Yep. And so there's one .32 caliber automatic, semi-automatic pistol caused most of the strife of the entire 20th century.
Well, I mean, it's almost a cliche, but it changed the course of history.
Oh, there's
literally.
no question, and it continues to do so because as a result of Versailles, we have World War II. As a result of Versailles, we have the partitioning of the Middle East. We've got the Palestine Mandate. We've got the conflicts that exist today did not exist before World War I. And that pistol triggered all that.
Part of the fun.
Yeah,
It's fascinating. I mean, it really is. When you think about, people think about, who cares, who wants to see a room full of guns? But when you talk about the history and you talk about it, I mean, it's such a simple way to put it. I mean, when you think about just your statement and the grandioseness of the reality of your statement, I mean, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, and it's everybody, everything has been impacted by that pistol shot, by that one, those rounds going off of that gun. Everybody on planet Earth has been impacted.
Investigative journalist, political analyst, and commentator. She's the founding editor of The Foreign Desk, a newswire service covering stories from around the globe with an emphasis on their impact on U.S. foreign policy. So what is the BDS movement? BDS stands for Boycott, Divest, and Sanction, aimed at the State of Israel. It is something that began about 2005 with a collection of Palestinian NGOs with the goal of going out and really truly waging a political, economic, cultural, and ideological campaign to delegitimize the State of Israel. What's been interesting to see is a lot of people, especially in the United States, are not as fully aware of what's taking place with the BDS movement because it really has been focused more on our campuses. It has been basically in the academic centers where the BDS movement has really gained a foothold in the United States. So many people are not aware of it, but don't be deceived. It is a global movement across the world that is really being aimed at delegitimizing the State of Israel. And so I'm hoping that as we talk through this a little bit, you'll get a better understanding of what it is, the motivations behind it, where it stands right now, and then what we can do when we go home to really combat the BDS movement. So, Sandra, if you could give a few quick comments on that, and we'll just move down the line, keep it quick, and then I'll start asking some questions.
Sure, thanks. It's a pleasure to be out here again. As I mentioned before, the Palestinian Authority has a payment program to reward and incentivize terror. This is the other side of the coin. BDS is their political warfare against the State of Israel. BDS really should stand for bigotry, dishonesty, and slander. Bigotry is the anti-Semitism. The dishonesty is from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. It's about getting rid of all of Israel. And the slander is that it's about delegitimizing the very State of Israel. These are all conditions that cannot be and do not lead to peace. In fact, if anything, they put the Palestinians further down.
Great. So I just want to kind of touch on what Ned was saying as well and what Sandra was saying. So it really is a misinformation campaign, a disinformation campaign, if you will. It basically propagates all sorts of anti-Semitic tropes in order to push this sort of delegitimization, the denigration of the State of Israel. I really think it's important, though, to touch upon the idea that it's specifically, at least in the United States, it's gained the most traction in academia, and that's because it's touching upon the most intellectually vulnerable portions of our population. You have youth that are there in order to learn. And if we have this sort of anti-Israel information just sort of seeping into academia, no one's really regulating it or filtering it in any sort of meaningful way, we could have problems down the road. I mean, in 2006, only 9% of millennials sympathize with Palestinians. Now that ratio is about 27%. So we've seen a threefold increase in the number of millennials who are sympathizing with the Palestinian cause over the Israeli cause. And I don't think it's a coincidence that the BDS movement really took off in 2005. So what they've managed to accomplish, at least in the young American psyche, is pretty remarkable. And the fact that this is going on and older generations just don't have the access to it and wouldn't necessarily, that's an issue. So I'm happy that we're going to be here talking about that.
Lisa.
Picture a 13-year-old girl soaked in her own blood. This horrific picture would be perfect for the cover of the New York Times had she been a Syrian, but she is an Israeli. And the truth is that there's always been a double standard when it comes to Israel, and BDS is no different. Make no mistake, BDS is not to take Israel out of business. It's meant to take Israel off the map. And that is the dishonest propaganda that has really fueled the BDS movement, whether it's from the campus or to union workers or to the emotional plea made to everyday Americans to follow this movement. Now, the challenge with combating BDS is that it's enshrouded in this effort to protect human rights. Human rights. The same people who support suicide bombings, where these young children or people who are at a pizza shop or on a local bus are being blown up, people who support this kind of violence are now worried about human rights. When you see somebody who's supporting the BDS movement, ask them, what was the last thing you did for the Palestinian people? Or what was the last thing that the Palestinian authorities or Hamas, who's now in charge, did for the Palestinian people? And the truth is, I cover this day in and day out. I can tell you what Israel has done for the Palestinian people, what Israel has done for its Christians, for its Muslims, for its Druze, and for its Bedouin populations. And those are the facts. Those are the facts that are missing from the mainstream media. And the truth is that until this is uncovered and we can become the ambassadors of this type of information, the emotional plea that the BDS movement makes will carry that propaganda.
Thank you. So I want to ask some questions, and I'll aim the questions at one of you, but I hope that all of us will join into that conversation. Sandra, I want to ask, I am growing more and more concerned. We've been seeing this in the news, rise of some anti-Semitic behavior here in the United States, which is troubling. It's sad to see. Do you think that the BDS movement is normalizing anti-Semitic behavior?
Absolutely. I mean, as I mentioned at first, the B stands for bigotry. And I recently took a daughter on a tour of Columbia University. And in the middle of campus, there's two protests. On the north side was the Arabs protesting against Israel, and on the south side was the Jews protesting against Israel. And at the end of the tour, and it was nonchalant, tour guide didn't mention anything. At the end of the tour, around the tour for an hour, I said to her, what were those people protesting about? She said, oh, it's Israel Apartheid Week. Yeah. You know, and very nonchalant things. So now, throughout the rest of this young tour guide's life, after she graduates Columbia, she's got to think, we always had Israel Apartheid Week.
Right.
Right? And so they're defining it in that way. And so BDS is very insidious, particularly on the college campuses, because that's when people are impressionable, and that's when they will form the opinions that will carry them for the rest of their lives. Even though she didn't participate in the protest, even though she didn't really know the details, all she knew was it's Israel Apartheid Week.
No, and that's what concerns me, is that these young people, 18, 19, 20, who are going to be our leaders in the future, 10, 15 years from now, are going to have these thoughts, are going to have this in their mindset that, you know, Israel Apartheid Week, that Israel is the equivalent of South Africa. And I think it's a very dangerous mentality to let fester on our college campuses. But Ariel, you've got some other thoughts, too, on what's been taking place on the campuses.
Absolutely. So I think it's been a really focused campaign in order to make sure that this sort of propaganda is disseminated, and disseminated in such a way as to sort of avoid the public eye. I think that a lot of times you'll run into certain pro-BDS professors, and they might not be professedly pro-BDS, but what they'll do is they'll incorporate into their curriculum. They will invite certain anti-Israel activists onto campus. They'll make sure that students are required as part of their course to attend one of these seminars or all of these seminars. A lot of times they'll form advocacy groups specifically for BDS professors. I believe there's one out of California called the California Scholars for Freedom. Don't be fooled by the name. It's really just a collection of pro-BDS professors that kind of have joined rank and file in order to protect one another. And so when they do use their university server to put a BDS resource page up, they have the proper protections in place. And, you know, what's most frightening about this is that these are taxpayer dollars. You're talking about UC Berkeley, which is one of the institutions, one of the 6 institutions that student government associations passed a resolution in, I think, 2013 to 2014. Either 2012 or 2013, they passed a resolution basically saying we support the boycott, divestment of Israel movement. And, it's fortunately, you have the higher ups at academic institutions saying, no, we're not going to act upon this resolution. But that doesn't mean it's not being successful. That doesn't mean that this ideology is not being disseminated among the population, even if the university isn't responding to it. So that's something to keep in mind as well.
So, Lisa, we know that a lot of these movements don't just happen, that this activity doesn't just all of a sudden crop up. We know that it's being funded somewhere by someone. Where is the money coming to fund the BDS movement? Who's doing that? Who's funding it?
Yeah, there's a long list of whether they're supporters or funders, sponsors. And, when you go to the website and you look at this long list.
And where can people go? Where's the website that they can go to really look at these lists and these names of people who are...
If you just Google BDS Movement official site, you'll come across a long list of supporters domestically, within Europe, abroad. And it's become the kosher form of terrorism, I should say halal form of terrorism.
Right.
It's become a way for those who are aware of what this is doing to support another form of terrorism. And I bet you many of them don't know that they're supporting this kind of terrorism. So it's a very dishonest, it's a dishonest movement. And I think what it truly comes down to is that, well, here's the good news. I don't want this to be all bad news today.
Right.
The good news is that the BDS movement as an economic movement is completely failing.
Yes,
it is completely failing. But you fight divestment with divestment. You fight boycotts with boycotts. You can talk about the Ivanka Trump, for example, boycott and pulling her stuff off the shelves, but then go to Amazon. She's a #1 seller in a lot of categories. So you fight dollar to dollar, whether you're pro or you're anti. But what's happening is that propaganda, that ideology is still being spread. And they're going after minds and hearts that are up for grabs. And they do this, whether it's the unions, whether it's the college campus, it's the mob mentality that they're after. They're not after the informed individuals, they're after the low-informed individuals.
No, exactly, and that's why I was so excited to be able to do this panel for people, for you all to understand and get a better grasp, at least for 30 minutes, about what the BDS movement is about, what it's doing, where it has really gained traction on our campuses. The thing that is of some concern is, again, it's normalizing certain behavior, certain rhetoric, certain approaches towards the state of Israel, but also towards the Jewish population. So the thing that is really becoming apparent to me is that when these things start to crop up, you have to immediately address them, whether it's the alt-right movement, whether it's the BDS movement. In my mind, they are anti-Semitism by another name. And so the thing that is of concern is these things start slowly because people don't fully understand what they're about. I have seen some languages, some verbiage in student newspapers about people promoting the BDS movement that has been very aggressive, hateful speech. But it starts slowly, people don't understand it. Do we see any correlation between some of this stuff that's taking place and starting to gain root between the 1930s, Germany, and here? And that does, trust me when I say, when you will have seen some of this language, that's not too far of a stretch to say, hateful, we should put these people into ovens. We cannot have progress with the parasitic Jew. These are things that are being written in student newspapers across our campuses. And so it's something that you realize it starts slowly. People don't understand. There's ignorance about it. But Sandra, what would be your take on this? And I know, Ariel, I think you've got some thoughts on this as well.
Well, it's a sad state of affairs because exactly as you said, if you don't stop it, it's going to spread. Right. And even though people might not believe the Nazi caricatures of Israeli leaders, they say, well, they're still bad people. And that's part of the slander to delegitimize the state of Israel and say that they just simply don't deserve to exist. So I think very much so, being anti-Israel is the new anti-Semitism. And these two go hand in hand, and this is not something new. In 2005, I went over, Bush sent me to this conference on anti-Semitism in Cordoba, Spain, and we were dealing with that issue there, but now it's grown, and with the BDS movement, you can really see the impact of it, where I think anti-Semitism is much more in vogue, particularly on the college campuses.
Right. Ariel, I know
And
you had a few thoughts on this.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I think what's interesting about the idea of the academic boycott is really not allowing Jewish professors with Israeli citizenship to come over into universities, American universities, to participate in conferences, to publish research or collaborate with American professors. And if you put that visual, this is what their goal is, at least. These are what the boycott movement is hoping for. If you juxtapose that next to the image of 1930s Germany, where Nazi officials were literally pushing out Jewish professors out of German universities, that's not a coincidence that that's the same sort of intellectual suppression taking place. And so the BDS movement in general is just a way of, again, what Nazis had hoped to do as well, which is economically, socially, politically, culturally isolate the Jews. And I think you had both touched on already the idea of how anti-Semitism can definitely be cloaked or protected by this anti-Zionist movement. Now, does that mean everybody in this movement is anti-Semitic? No. I think because it's so much disinformation being spread, it would be very disingenuous to say, oh, everyone is anti-Semitic who's taking part in BDS. But do I think there's a lack of knowledge and ignorance associated with this movement? And do I think that maybe, or not maybe, very much so, the people in the higher ups leading this push, especially from the Palestinian side? Yes, I definitely think it's driven by anti-Semitism.
Lisa, feel free to jump in. Any other thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think you can compare apples to apples and say that there was actually a boycott of Jewish businesses in Nazi Germany, and that's how it began. But that is the operative term, is that's where it began. It was a movement to go further and further and further, and that's exactly what's being done here, is that it's being enshrouded in this movement of we just don't want their products. But it goes much further beyond that. And unfortunately, the media is complicit in all of this. I was just in Syria a few months ago, and I go to the Middle East very often, but this was my first time visiting, hospitals on the borders and refugee camps. And the most amazing story that I've ever done in my life was going to this hospital on the Israeli side and seeing where Israel was actually treating Syrians, not just from the war, but cancer patients and children and high complication labor cases. And they don't need to do that. This is an enemy state. And I interviewed someone from the Free Syrian Army, and I said to him, what did you think about Jews or Israel before you got here? He said, I thought they had horns and tails. I said, well, what do you think now that they saved your life? This guy got shot in the knee by an ISIS sniper. There was a hole this big in his leg. And he said, I still think they have horns and tails. So this is what Israel's doing. No one's reporting on what they're doing, how they're helping, how they send aid to Darfur and to Haiti. And all the work that Israel's doing is being completely ignored by the media, but the BDS movement gets a front row seat, unfortunately.
No, and it's, as you start to normalize, and this is what I'm concerned about, that it normalizes, again, this behavior, this rhetoric, and it's something that we have to be very aware of. The good news is, as you made that point, Lisa, it's not being terribly successful in its stated goals of really, undermining and delegitimizing the state of Israel. And the good news is, I believe it's now 25 state legislatures have passed anti-BDS language. It's somewhere in that ballpark. My hope is, and that I would hope to be a part of it, that we'll get to all 50 states to pass anti-BDS language. And I hope that it happens soon. Again, as I said earlier, you can't allow these things to fester. You have to deal with them. You have to be aggressive with them and say, no, we will not tolerate this. And so as everyone is sitting here and those that are watching, we're here at CPAC for a couple more days. Hopefully you're going to even have even greater panels and President Trump's coming tomorrow, but you're going to be going home. And when everybody is going to go home, I always like to make sure that you're going to hear great ideas, you're going to hear great information, but ideas and information that's not linked to action doesn't actually bring about meaningful change. And so it's my hope that whatever you hear from the stage at CPAC, you'll be given some action items to be able to take home. And so the question that I want to ask you three is, when people go home from CPAC, in your minds, give me some of the best action items that they can take home with them to make sure that they are educating and combating the BDS movement in their local communities. So Sandra, if we could start from you and then just come this way.
Well, I'm going to give a little different tack than our other two esteemed panelists. I think that we have to go on the offensive against BDS, that in order to really change hearts and minds, the people who are predisposed have to be willing to listen. And sometimes it's hard to get people willing to listen to facts. Right. So I think what we need to do is to educate that the Palestinian Authority has been sponsoring terror through paying the terrorists, but also through political warfare, aka the BDS movement, that these are two sides of the tactic that they're using. And I think that if we expose who the Palestinian Authority really is, I think it will change the view of Israel with that regard.
Great. Ariel.
I agree with Sander completely. I will say, too, I think there's this misconception that Hamas is much worse than the PA, but I think they're equally terrible. And so I think that there should be a much, one is just more flagrant about it. But I really do believe that we need to be better about making sure that the truth is known, whether it be on college campuses and outside college campuses. I also want to say, follow the money too. Go on to NGO Monitor. Figure out which charities are actually charitable and which ones are donating to pro-Palestinian causes. Human Rights Watch, they were a huge support of the Caterpillar boycott, which I'm not sure, I won't get into too much detail, but I will say this, that there are several NGOs out there they're called Halo NGOs because they're given a little bit of this esteemed sort of humanitarian aura, but there are several NGOs out there that you wouldn't even suspect are at all tied to pro-Palestinian causes and sort of spreading this sort of BDS propaganda, but they are. So be vigilant about that, and be vigilant as taxpayers. Figure out what's going on your local college campus, if it is a state system.
Lisa.
I think it's pretty simple. The next time you see someone who supports BDS, you say to them, do you use Waze? Do you use Google Chrome? Do you use Facebook?
That's right.
Are you willing to get off these platforms? Are you willing to never walk into a hospital or use a cell phone again? I dare you to truly boycott, divest, and sanction Israeli products. And the truth of the matter is 75% of Israel's industrial exports are technology. So you can't just say, I'm not going to buy hummus and say that I'm really following the BDS movement. And really talk about the accomplishments and the dedication that Israel has to its neighbors in the Arab world, how it compares to its neighbors on human rights, on women's rights, on gay rights. It is a Jewish state, and there is an annual gay pride parade in Jerusalem, its holiest city. These are the facts that are being totally buried under everything else. And you say to someone, I dare you, I truly dare you to stay away from Israeli products and put down your cell phone.
We've got less than a minute. I would encourage all of you, when you go home, to at least pick up the phone, call your state legislator and say, I just want you to be aware, if you've not already addressed the BDS movement, that you would be willing to put forth language in the state legislature that would be anti-BDS language and help educate your elected officials, and not just at the state legislature, but even your local officials. There's been some interesting things that have been taking place with city councils and county commissions. Make sure that you are out there educating your elected officials on this and saying, if you haven't already passed anti-BDS language, I would hope that you would in the very near future. What's encouraging to me that's taking place right now is that our president has shown that he will stand with Israel. He has taken a strong stand with him. I am encouraged by that. They are our best ally in the Middle East, and so it remains up to us, too, as well. It's up to us as well, as Trump has taken a strong stance, that you also take a stance and say, we want to protect and we want to support our best ally in the Middle East, and what you can do when you go home is make sure that your elected officials are aware of this BDS movement that is attempting to undercut and delegitimize the state of Israel. We are out of time. I want to thank all of the panelists for being here. I hope that you enjoyed it, and I hope that you will take this information home and apply it. Thank you very much.
When I moved into off-campus housing, they boasted that it was safe. Not a single incident since it had opened. I was the first. I woke up in the middle of the night, suffocating. Shut up, he said. Don't say a word. For the next 2 hours, I knew I was going to die. and there was nothing I could do. Now I'm a mother of 2. And if that predator or anyone else tries to harm me or my family, they have to come through my firearm first. I will never be unarmed or utterly vulnerable ever again. The only reason I can say that is because the NRA fought for my rights before I ever knew that I needed them. I'm the National Rifle Association of America, and I'm freedom's safest place.
We hope you join us for our breakout conversations. If you're able to attend a breakout, the good news is you're going to get a fast pass, and that fast pass is going to get you priority seating in this ballroom tonight for the Vice President's remarks, okay? So we hope you have a good night, and I hope you had a, we'll see you soon, but I hope you had a good first day of programming. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. Dennis Santiago, Dennis Talks Guns, joining us on the program right now. The base of gun owners has definitely expanded. So the new normal, so to speak, is a lot higher than it was, let's say, 10 years ago, or even when Barack Obama first took office.
Oh, yeah. Well, see, here's an interesting thing, because this came out of the discussions yesterday. I'm waiting for the data so I can look through the numbers and confirm it, but the indicators are that in the past 5 years, there's that narrative that the only people that buy guns are the ones that own them now, and they're just bulking on them. Apparently, that's not true. Apparently, what's been happening is there's been this, within this noise of this politically driven stocking up by the people that do own guns, there's been a steady increase in new participants in the sport at all levels. And the breadth of the types of people that are entering into the sport are it's expanding into just pretty much every corner of America that you could think of, every subset. I mean, I'm out in California, right? And the biggest demand right now for I'd like to learn to shoot the M1 in a CMP match, because I instruct in that kind of stuff. It's gay guys.
Really?
Yeah, they're going, that looks like fun, actually. And I go, it is fun. You should try it.
Listen, I think it's fantastic. And as you say, there is no stereotypical American gun owner anymore. There just isn't. If you're, you go to the mall, go to, look around your office. Yeah. And that's who gun owners are in this country.
Yep, pretty much. It's and they're getting good at it.
Yep. Well, that's the other thing, right? You're right, because it's not that people have just become gun owners. They are becoming shooters. They want that training. They want to go to the range. They want that range access. Jada Walla from Skullbound. I love what you do, because not only do you go to interesting places and you're kind of constantly, again, pushing yourself to try new things, but the people that you hunt with and the people that you take out, Jana, it's got to just be that you've got a great life and you've got a great job, but I think as I watch your episodes and I see the men and women that you get to spend time with, that has to be the best part of what you do.
It truly is. Excuse me. I've hooked up with a group called Wishes for Warriors, and we take combat veterans out hunting, fishing, and this year I took a triple amputee, Eric Galvin, on his very first elk hunt. Eric had never even heard an elk bugle, and he had never seen a snowstorm. He's from Texas, lives in California. We got a big blizzard thrown at us. We had tough terrain, and Eric is the epitome of an American warrior. I mean, positive attitude. He was like, hey, this happened to me. He lost his right arm, both legs. Hasn't slowed him down. He just got his undergrad. He's going back for his master's in social work. He wants to help change the VA system. Just an amazing person. And when you're able to spend time, on a hunt with these kind of warriors and their positive attitude and everything they've gone through, it just makes you appreciate your life all the more, your freedoms all the more, the sacrifices they've made. I'm a woman living in the greatest country on this planet. I am free to live my life the way I want. I'm free to carry guns. I'm free to hunt, free to vote, my religion, whatever. And it's not free. I mean, these men and women give up a lot. And it's just a simple way to say thank you, but really they make my life so much richer.
Well, but again, I'm sure that they would say the same thing if we talked to them, and they would talk about the benefits that they got out of that. I mean,
but again, you talk about the terrain and the weather and this is not an easy hunt.
No. And it's funny.
I'll be honest with you. You've offered to take me bear hunting in Montana, and I thought to myself, I'm not in shape. I'm not ready to go bear hunting in Montana. And then I hear these stories. I'm thinking, well, damn it, I need to get in shape then,
Oh, they're so inspiring to everybody. But no, these are hardcore. The first one I ever did, I took Bo Richenbeck, double amputee Navy SEAL, and that warrior climbed the mountains for 7 days, not even with his prosthetics. He had to take them off to give her uneven terrain, and he literally just crawled the mountains until he got his bull, and it was life-changing for Jim and I and Bo and his dad. And yeah, these are hardcore hunts, and they're so inspiring that it's been, I feel like I've been given this platform for a bigger purpose, and that's to share their stories.
And so what are your plans for 2017? What are your goals?
I'm going to do some more hunts with Wishes for Warriors. I've got a really neat Alaska black bear hunt where we'll be living on a boat and hunting out.
Bears aren't in. They're not in the sea.
No, but it's nice to be in the water looking for them versus maybe on the land. But it'll be a different style of hunt we've never done before. What else do we got going on?